Baiting and feeding are also likely part of the reason we have an overpopulation of deer, particularly in northern Wisconsin. By supplying additional energy to the deer herd, baiting and supplemental feeding can lead to a decrease in winter mortality and an increase in the birth rate, allowing the herd to grow rapidly. When spring arrives and supplemental feeding ends, the oversized deer herd must find other sources of food.
Well, deer damage is caused when the deer, it starts right at the beginning when the corn is planted, and the deer eat off the corn and the corn doesn't have a chance to grow. And then sometimes when the corn does grow, the deer come in and they will eat the ears and knock it down, and it's just an ongoing thing all year long. If they don't eat it off, if they don't pull it out by the roots, it will come back and it will try to grow, but it never succeeds in growing and becoming a viable crop. And that's part of our problem with too many deer. Our profit margin is small, and we really can't afford to have tons of deer, which we've got now.
It is perhaps our state's forests, however, that suffer the most from excessive deer numbers. This small area of forest has been fenced to keep deer out. Inside this deer exclosure, there are seedling hemlocks, red oak, white cedar, and many more healthy native plants. Outside it, there are only ferns. Deer are overbrowsing certain plants throughout our forests, and as a result, the forests of the future may be very different from those of today.
Well, what we're really disturbed about is the situation where we have essentially no new hardwood regeneration. In a healthy northern hardwood forest, you really do like to see a mix of seedlings, saplings, pole and saw timber sized trees. And as you look behind me on the forest floor, you'll see that there's essentially no seedlings at all, and those that are here are heavily browsed. We're really missing the diameter or caliper class from about a 1/2 inch to 3 inches in diameter. And that's due to the presence of a high deer population, I think exasperated by baiting and feeding. And it's pretty much decimated the understory of the regeneration. And this is going to be a recurring problem through various parts of the whole state of Wisconsin if we don't have a handle on the issue of baiting and feeding, in my opinion. You know, the average person isn't going to notice any difference, but when these young stands are saplings and seedlings that should be moving in the pole size class perhaps 30 years from now, that's going to be a void that's going to start showing up. And what it's going to mean is there's going to be a gap in the resource that would normally come in the harvestable stage 30, 40, 50 years from now, when our economy may really depend on forest products, and those trees aren't going to be in the size classes that we need to sustain a forest industry.
The future of Wisconsin's $22 billion a year forest products industry and its potential growth into new industries depend on the sustainable management of our forests. It's clear that baiting and feeding support an overpopulation of deer, which by their sheer numbers cause more agricultural damage, complicate herd management, and permanently alter the composition of our forests and ecosystems. Hunters, too, experience the consequences of baiting and feeding.
There's other issues involved with the baiting and feeding question, that of privatization of the deer herd, where people spend money to purchase a property for recreational purposes and have a neighbor baiting heavily and drawing deer out of the property that they purchased, and they're not able to access those unless they bait themselves. Becomes the almost baiting in self-defense.
The distribution of deer across the landscape is just as important to successful hunting as the number of deer on the landscape. Deer that follow daily patterns and move within their home range will provide a better hunt than deer that limit their movements in response to a bait pile. Deer that are drawn away from areas open to hunting and into town by feeding are not available to hunters. Baiting and feeding have spawned a great deal of debate, but it's clear that the biological reasons to prohibit the practices far outweigh any arguments in support of them. There's too much at stake in the Badger State to allow baiting and feeding to continue. Our deer herd, our forest and agriculture industries, our ecosystems, and ultimately our hunting culture itself are all at risk. baiting and feeding have no place in Wisconsin deer herd management. While it is currently legal to bait and feed deer in parts of Wisconsin, there is no question that these practices are harmful to our deer herd and Wisconsin's industries and ecosystems. The right choice is not to bait or feed deer because of the potential of these practices to accelerate the spread of disease, complicate deer population management, and negatively impact Wisconsin's industries and ecosystems.
Baiting and feeding is not good for the health of our deer herd. Diseases like CWD and TB are more easily passed as deer feed at bait piles. And it is well documented that TB can be passed from wild deer to dairy cows, threatening our state's dairy herd. Baiting and feeding also keeps our deer population artificially high, threatening the health of our forests and our forest economy. Deer are wild animals that have been a part of Wisconsin's landscape for centuries. A truly wild and healthy deer herd is essential to a strong Wisconsin ecosystem. Let's do the right thing and be good stewards of the land and wildlife. Future generations are counting on it.